I know you guys are really tired right now. I know you guys put in the work. My boy is going to work you guys, okay? But look, if you just hear me out tonight, it could change the trajectory of your life, okay? First, I want to remind you guys of how beautiful today is, and that we should be grateful for every moment of every day. And as we sit here tonight, in the presence of the moon, the stars, and heaven, we should be grateful for life and every breath. Life is about choices we make within the moments. And each moment will define the next moment. But sometimes our choices in life, we can lose our way. So when I say that is we can become content. We can become content with just surviving, just getting by. We can allow the world, the conditions and circumstances to affect us. We trap ourselves in emotions of the past, mistakes and failures. A past that's unchangeable. Mistakes and failures is a process of being your best self. But yet we focus on the things that we can't change, like people's opinions of us, a future that is not even guaranteed to any one of us. So it's important to understand the reason for the way, the path, a warrior's life. And that is, well, it's your choices. It's the things that you're willing to do every single day to become your best self. And I tell you guys, in life, it's so easy to get lost. It's so easy to be trapped in the mistakes of the past. We trap ourselves. We concern ourselves with a future not guaranteed. We concern ourselves with things outside our control. But I tell you this, we have control. We have control of our life. But the only way that you can have control of your life is you have to have a powerful why. You have to have a why that's so strong that it's going to take you through every evolution of your life. You ever heard of the story of the privileged child who was given everything? Best parents, education, schooling. But yet this child grows up to be an adult that checks himself in and out of drug rehab. But yet we hear this other story of an unprivileged child. A child that faces oppression, racism, a broken household. But yet he rises up to be a leader. To be a leader in society, he rises up to be a great human being. You see, because the why is so powerful. The thing is, your why has to be more powerful than your own existence. There, we were conducting counter-poaching operations in northern Cameroon. And up in the border of Bunamajida, by the loom of a primitive fire, this Cameroon commando spoke of survival. And he spoke of, in these lands, every day is a struggle between life and death. He said that every morning within these lands, there's a lion. And this lion wakes up knowing that it must run faster than the slowest gazelle or it would starve. And every day that goes by, this predator gets weaker. So he knows that it must give everything it has that day for its existence, for its survival. And every morning a gazelle wakes up knowing that it must run faster than the fastest lion or it will be eaten alive. You see, the why between these two animals was existence, survival. But let me ask you this. In today's world, is survival enough? See, survival is just barely getting by. Is that enough? We act like it is. For a majority of us, we get up early in the morning, we go into work, doing a job we hate just for pay. We concern ourselves with things outside of our control. Like an uncontrollable external, but yet we're not focusing on our own internal happiness. You see? So the thing is, what is going to carry you through life? It's a strong why. It's a strong why. It's a strong why, stronger than your own existence. Now, how does someone just come up on their why, their life's purpose? How do you just come upon that? Well, I'll tell you, personally for me, it was through the struggles. It was through the hardships. It was through those times that I found my own internal strength. You understand? It's the way that we look at the world, our narrative. So if you want to live a fulfilling life, then you must first have a positive why. You must have a why that's stronger than yourself. So today, I want to share with you guys how I came upon my why. A why that came to me at my lowest point in my life. A why that came to me that's so powerful that led me to 27 countries, fighting for the oppressed and freeing the modern day slave. A why that's so great that after my 15 years of war and conflict and 23 years of service to God and country, a why so powerful that led me to God and peace. A why so strong that I'm here today. So let me tell you, a philosopher Nietzsche once said that one must have chaos in oneself to give way to a dancing star. Without chaos, there will be no mountains to climb, no armies to fight, or dragons to slay. Without chaos, there will never be a realization of one's internal truth. See, I was born in chaos. I was born in war. I was born on a cold cement floor in the basement of Saigon Hospital. My mother shielded my body from incoming artillery fire on the morning of my birth. At this stage of the war, American troops had left Vietnam, and I was born on the losing side of the war. I lost my freedoms at 3 months old. My uncles that served alongside Americans were pushed out to the re-education camps. These were torture camps. Any prisoner who was sick, ill, was brought out to the jungles and murdered. At 3 years old, my family and I escaped genocide on an overstuffed wooden fishing boat with hundreds of other refugees. Our boat was only one boat out of the thousands of refugees escaping. It was such a lucrative business for pirates to come in and forcefully stop the escaping refugees, board the boats, kill the men, rape the women, and sell the children into slavery. See, it was common practice amongst fleeing refugees to carry poison within their belongings. And the poison was administered to the child when the journey ends, so they may not endure a life of slavery and torture. Somehow we made it past the piracy, and we made our way into Malaysia, where the Malaysian Coast Guard stopped us at gunpoint. They roped us and pulled us back out into the South China Sea. They shot our engine, cut the ropes, and they left us there in the South China Sea to die. What turned out to be a 2-day trip to Malaysia turned out to be a desperate survival situation. My mother said we were stranded. People were dying. She said people were getting thrown overboard. Dehydration. We were left there to die. And somehow, by the grace of God, a Russian supply boat was exiting out of Vietnam, and they saw us, and they saved us. And they brought us into a refugee camp in Indonesia, where my family and I had to live off the land for 1.5 years. These refugee camps were dangerous and people were murdered. You know, after a year and a half, we were sponsored to go to the United States. During the Vietnam War, my aunt met an American Special Forces Green Beret officer. And during the war, his G-base got overran where he was stabbed by enemy SKS. He was evacuated. And my grandfather saw him in Saigon Hospital, and he told my aunt that there's no way that he's going to make it. But he's a Green Beret. And he went back to the States and he married my aunt, and he was the one who sponsored the paperwork for us to come to America. And let me tell you what happened when I came to America. Vietnam was a very unpopular war. And my family and I were the face of this unpopular war. So when we came over to America, we were not well received. We were extremely poor. My parents lost everything. We had to start over again in this new country that did not accept us. People ask me too, what was your first memories of America, man? I'll tell you. My mother took me to a grocery store, and we were loading groceries. And this older guy came up to me, and he spit on my face. I was only 8. And he flicked my mom off. He said, you guys need to go home to your country. You don't belong here. As I wiped the hate, saliva, cigarette, and alcohol off my face, I realized that we would never be accepted here. And you know, we were very poor. And you know, we got help from the refugees that came here, and it was third hand-me-down generation clothes with holes over it. You know, and I was reminded every day when I went to school how poor I was and how I smell indigenous every day. I was reminded that I didn't belong, from the teachers to my peers. But you know, I want to tell you something. My mother once told me that we will all have our bad days. But the thing is, what do you learn from it? What do you learn from your bad days, and who is the person that you will become from this day? You know, I want to share with you this day, because this day changed the trajectory of my life. I was 8. And, you know, substitute teacher days, guys, was the worst for me. Look, my name is Vietnamese, it's pronounced Tu Tung Lam, right? And people just have a hard time pronouncing that name. So I say, my name is Tu, but this persistent substitute teacher had to pronounce my name right. So it just echoed through the class. And everybody started making fun of me, and this bully decided to just jump up, spit in my face, flicked me off. The substitute teacher was so upset that he said, you two boys go down to the principal. I was innocent. So I did. I went down to the principal's office. And you know, look guys, the principal said, your parents are going to come pick you up. Well, my mother doesn't have a car. So I knew I was going to be sitting there for a while. So as I sat there, finally the bully's mother arrived, and she kicked open the door. She demanded to know what's going on. And the principal stood up, he looked at me, and he pointed towards me. You see that boy right there? Your son called that boy right there the little chink. And I'll tell you, man, yeah, I was 8. But I tell you, that word cut through me that day more than any other day. And I was so defeated that day. And the mother went over to her son and picked up her son, and she walked over to me, and then she demanded me to look at her. And as I looked up, she said, my son is right. You don't belong here. You need to go back home to your country. I never cried so hard. I cried so hard that day. The principal would say, boy, you're going to cry like that. You need to go out in the hallway. So I did. And I tell you, man, I've never been so uncomfortable in my own skin, defeated. My mother never came pick me up. I caught the bus home. And my mother had enough going on in her lives with just trying to survive. So I kept it to myself. My mother knew there was something was wrong. And she came to me that night and she said, son, you will have your bad days. But what do you learn from it? And who do you become? You know, I think back to that day. And I tell you, man, even though I was defeated, I knew that there was something stronger than hate. I just didn't know what it looked like. How can you know at 8 years old? But I knew there was an energy out there that was stronger than hate. I just didn't know what it was. I continued to get picked on. And eventually, you know, my mother and father got divorced. And it was a very hard time for me. And my mother eventually remarried to an American Special Forces Green Beret drill sergeant. Very tough discipline. I had to struggle with that discipline. And I missed my father. So when I was 9, my mother, I haven't heard from my father for over a year. My mother came in with a cardboard box. She said, "Here, this is from your father." And within these contents of this box, there was 4 VHS tapes written in Vietnamese. I couldn't even read it. So I randomly picked up a tape and I threw it in the VCR. It was The Art of Budo, The Art of Being Samurai, The Ancient Warrior's Code. And I tell you guys, 9 years old, defeated, with a concept of the way, Bushido, the way of the warrior. What is it? Fast forward that to 11 years old, there was 2 things that happened that changed the whole trajectory of my life. My uncle, the Special Forces officer, picked me up, and he was driving me to Dairy Queen where we were just spending nephew time together. And he said, he must have sensed something was wrong with me because he said to me out of the blue, he said, "Too, there'll be days when people flick you off and they'll spit in your face and they'll tell you don't belong here. You need to ask yourself, do you want to be a fucking commando today? When the bones hurt and you're aching, you want to quit. You need to ask yourself, do you want to be a fucking commando today? When it's cold outside and it's comfortable in your bed and you know you need to get up and go run that 10 miles and it's raining, it's wet, because you are a weapon that America relies on. Do you want to be a fucking commando today? 11 years old. Commando. Life of discipline. Later on that year, my mother, she drove me across town. Man, you know, we were not poor anymore, but we're not that rich. So my mother, she would spend all day cooking and driving across. Hours we would drive to these refugees, and then she would help them. And one day we were driving home, and I said, "Mom, why did we drive so many hours? They don't even appreciate you." She stopped the car and she said, "Look at me. No matter conditions or circumstances, if we can, we must help others. And in doing so, we create a better world." You see, from 9 to 11, I was indoctrinated into a Special Forces household. My uncle was Special Forces. My stepfather was Special Forces. Nobody liked me. So I only had my stepfather's friends, his teammates, that would stop by and tell me his commando stories. So I started putting it all together, the Special Forces. The Special Forces, de oppressed liber, the free to oppress, from oppressed man to free man. I realized at that young of age, if I can be this force to go around the world and fight for the enslaved and the oppressed, then that's the way for me. That's what I wanted. So I knew at 11 years old, I wanted to be a Special Forces Green Beret. At 18, I joined the Army. I was part of, 82nd Airborne Division. Then I went to Amphibious Long Range Reconnaissance. And at 21 years old, I was the Special Forces Green Beret for deploy Okinawa, Japan. From oppressed, now I'm fighting for the oppressed. For 23 years, I travel around 27 countries, fighting and freeing the oppressed. But the thing is, guys, the journey. Sometimes in your journey, you will lose yourself. And I tell you, at one point, I lost myself. and I picked up the sword of hate. Hate, what a powerful energy, right? Hate, when you're scared, when you're in a close quarters gunfight, hate is a weapon we use. My teammates and I weaponized it. It's part of our training. So I picked up the sword of hate and I carried that sword for many years. And I tell you, man, what hate does is blinds you from the world. See, what a beautiful night, right? But you'll never see it. A beautiful day, you'll never see it because hate blinds you from the world. But the one thing that the Special Forces did teach me was this: the why. The why. And this is what I'm saying to you guys. During part of your training now, it's going to hurt. You're going to be freaking tired. And sometimes you're just like, why am I doing this? When everybody's questioning what you're doing in your role in this world, you better know your why. You know, the long deployments, every one of my teammates know, the many deployments we go on, the deaths we miss, the birthdays, the births and deaths of loved ones. You're not around. You're in some foreign country running with some rebel. You better ask yourself. You better know your why. You know, my mother, right? My mother, she wanted me to go to college. And I wanted to be this commando, right? So I promised my mother, I said, Mom, I promise you I will go to college and I promise you I'll graduate college. Any team guy on a Special Forces A team would tell you, life is extremely hard on the A teams. It's fast paced. You're constantly gone. You're in countries that doesn't even have internet, cell phone infrastructure. But one thing that was consistent throughout my whole career, my 23 years career, was college. You know, combat rotations, coming back from direct action raids when my teammates washed the blood from their uniforms. And as they slept, I was the one that was up, studying. I was the one tramping through the jungles of the Philippines, hunting down Abu Sayyaf with a tough book in my rucksack, in a grass hut, typing out a term paper. And on the weekends, when my teammates go back to the G base and relax, I was the guy that drives to the internet cafes and take a midterm. And I tell you, I graduated at the top of my class with honors while fighting counter-poaching operations in Cameroon. I took my finals in on a Cameroon commando camp because I knew my why, you see. The Special Forces, a job where men die young. As I stood there underneath a shaded oak tree, watching my teammate's body being buried in his final resting place, struggling to understand the emotions here, wishing my friend peace. And as I stood there struggling for these words, I could hear in the distance, thank God for dead soldiers. Signs waving in the distance, waving at us, thanking God for us dying because they wanted to protest a political movement in the military. You better know your why. Covert missions around the world where you can't even talk to your wife. You're somebody else trying to hold a marriage together. Better know your why. And I tell you guys, after my 23 years, I really had a hard time. Because where do you go after you've freed oppressed? Where do you go after you live a life of such intensity? Where do you go? I tell you, for me, You know, my wife, she worked in Denver, and I'll tell you where it was for me. I sat in a living room, and I watched the TV that was off, and I heard the world. And I couldn't silence all the suffering, all the evils I saw. I couldn't silence it. And I tell you, I was really lost. And as I sat there, let me put you on my worst day. As I sat there, defeated, there was a voice that came over my head and said, get up. So I did. And I walked around this dark, empty house. And somehow I ended up in my office, in front of my books. I'm a student of education. I love reading. And I stood there in front of this bookcase. And randomly, I just picked up a book. Without even looking, I picked up a book. It was the Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi, a Ronin. Born in the late 1500s, died in 1645 after writing the Book of Five Rings. This Ronin was samurai. He was a master swordsman. He was an intellect. He was an artist. He was a philosopher. He was everything I wanted to be as a child. I lost my way. And I realized that at that moment. I realized that I lost my way and I needed to find myself back. You see, the answer was found when I was 11 years old. When I was defeated as a little boy, when I was a weak human being, the answer was there. A greater why, followed by purpose and action. So I did. I executed discipline. But this level of discipline was different from the discipline that I had to endure as a young child through my strict stepfather. It was different from what I had to endure as a Special Forces Green Beret. It was different from a college student. This level of discipline was fulfillment. You see, because fulfillment is the ingredient for happiness. But yet, we looked at the external things to make us feel good inside. So, every day I sat there and I practiced the art of peace. The art of peace for me was I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. People are like, why do you wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning? Because it's hard. It requires work to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. And I sit with God. And as the sun goes up, I'm grateful for that moment. And I'm grateful for that day. You see, my journey for peace, somehow it helped so many. And now, my wife and I, we travel around the United States and we give back to our communities. We help our communities. We travel around America and we help the law enforcement. Because we believe in what you guys do. And we know, and we help the law-abiding citizen because that's the love of our country. And through this path of peace, I met so many great people along the way. So this is the thing, guys. It's through the suffering, it's through the hardship is when you find your inner strength. Do not look for an easy life. Bruce Lee once said, do not look for an easy life. Pray for the strength to endure a hard one. The thing is, you need to hit your life with intensity. We have one life. Why not live it with meaning and purpose? It's not how long you live. It's how you choose to live. My uncle asked me once, as I was sitting there, 11 years old in Dairy Queen. My uncle, Special Forces officer, looked at me. He said, "Tu, what is a champion?" You know, I was 11. And I say, "Uncle, a champion is a person that wins." And my uncle reminded me that day that a loser can keep on going if he continues to win. A champion is a person that gets spit on. flicked off, and yet they still stand. A champion is a person that keeps a promise to the one they love most. A champion doesn't allow the conditions and circumstances to influence. They influence the situations by the actions they take every single day. In life, we need to be a champion. Remember this, guys. One moment can change the day. And one day can change a life. And one life that can change the world. Dio Presta Liber, God and Country. Thank you, guys.